By devoting just 6 minutes each weekday for 1 year, you can read through the entire New Testament using David's servant's daily devotional, HeavenWord Daily. Order your copy at heavenword.tv.
Well, hello and God bless you. Thank you so much for joining me here on our chronological study through the entire New Testament. We're back in Matthew today, and we've just closed out, almost, Matthew chapter 19, and I'm so excited to get into chapter 20. However, Matthew did not write this in chapter and verse. That was added hundreds and hundreds of years later, and so any reader up until that time would have just followed the flow right through, and it would never have entered their minds that when we start chapter 20, when they got to that place, that they would have thought, we can just start here and ignore everything that happened prior to verse 20, or chapter 20 and verse number 1. I want to show you something really important because I'm always emphasizing the importance of the context. Look at Matthew chapter 19 and verse number 30, okay? Jesus said, "But many who are first will be last, and the last first." Well, you could take that and say, well, wow, what a great truth that is, and pull it out of its context and make it mean all kinds of things. But it's best if we read it within the context to understand, how it fits into what Jesus was saying. And it does have relationship to something we're going to be reading in Matthew chapter 20. May I just have you jump down to Matthew 20 and verse number 16. Okay, this is, 16 verses later. Jesus said, "So the last shall be first and the first last." So you can see the subject doesn't change from Matthew 19:30 to Matthew 20:16. Although many folks would just skip over that final verse of Matthew 19, jump right into chapter 20, and miss out on some important stuff. Okay, now, what is that context? Remember, we've been talking about this. Jesus had just answered the rich young ruler's question about what he must do to obtain eternal life. All right, so the whole subject was eternal life. When he told him he had to sell his possessions and care for the poor and lay up treasure in heaven, and the disciples were astonished and asked, "Who can be saved?" And the rich young ruler walked away very sadly because he owned so many possessions. And then the disciples asked Jesus, "Well, what will there be for us? Okay, we haven't sold everything, but we have left everything behind." So can we read that context just real quickly here? Matthew 19 and verse number 28. Here's Jesus' response to the 12. "Truly I say to you that you who have followed me in the regeneration," that is when there's a new heavens and the new earth, when the whole creation is born again, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is way off in the future distance. This is talking about the special, specific rewards that you 12 are going to get. And of course, I think we're smart enough to realize that Judas forfeited his place. Verse 29, "And everyone," now here this applies to all of us, "who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or farms for my name's sake will receive many times as much and will inherit eternal life." So this is all future subject stuff. This is all talking about eternal life still. That was the question that the rich young ruler originally posed. And then we come to verse number 30, "But many who are first will be last, and the last first." So already we're getting a little bit better understanding of what Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about many being first in this life and then being last in this life. Like, nice guys always finish last. That's what they say, which is not true. But anyways, this is reference to what's going to happen far off in the future heavenly rewards. What will there be for us? And Jesus says, many who are first, that must be referring to first now, will be last then, and many who are last now will be first then. And so there's going to be this huge reversal. Now, may I point out, Jesus did not say everyone who's first now will be last then, and vice versa. And he didn't say a few or just a couple. He did say many, but let's remember what he said. So this doesn't have to have application to you. You don't have to think, well, I'm doing pretty well right now, and so that's guaranteed that I'll be doing pretty bad then. No, 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 no. We want to make sure we're in God's perfect will, doing exactly what he said. And this next 16 verses in Matthew 20 has a lot to do with that. Okay, and this is the parable of the landowner and the laborers. And it starts in verse number 1 of chapter 20. Jesus says, for. I'm going to stop right there. For. That's a synonym for because, right? And so what Jesus is about to say relates to what he just said. And we've already read verse number 16, so we know he's going to explain in more detail what he means by the first being last and the last being first. This parable is the unveiling, the unpacking of that mysterious phrase. Verse number 1, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers in his vineyard. And when he agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them out into his vineyard. A denarius was a day's wages, a common day's wage for a laborer, okay? And they worked, at least 8 hours, sometimes 10 hours, sometimes 12 hours. When the harvest is ready, you work from sunup to sundown because you want to get the harvest in as quickly as you possibly can for a number of good reasons. And so he's hired these guys. It doesn't say exactly what time, but we read in verse number 3, he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. So the third hour would be about 9 a.m. And so we can assume that the other guys were hired before 9 a.m. If it was at sunup, it could have been as early as 6 a.m. They'd already put in 3 hours when the landowner stumbles upon these guys and hires them. All right, now, it gets so interesting. You probably know the parable. You've read it before. But I think there's a meaning in here that's most people, lots of people anyways, are missing. All right, but you're not going to miss it because we're going to keep on studying and we're going to keep on looking at the context. Okay, so stay with me on this. You're going to be so glad that you did. See you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.